Like my fifth cup of coffee today.
Oh, fuck.
It's
only half 11. Okay.
Coffee is life.
Welcome to In Bits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. I'm Nicola.
And I'm Liam.
And we're both lecturers in IADT in psychology and cyberpsychology.
So, Nicola, what are you in bits about today?
I'm in bits about cybercrime, and I reckon that a lot of people who have experienced cybercrime, and particularly scams, which is what we're going to be talking about today, are also a bit in bits about it. And a lot of people are in bits worrying about it. So we are going to talk today about how cybercriminals use our psychology against us, get us to act against our own interests. So I want to talk a bit about how we can be manipulated by scammers, why it's so effective, and I'm going to talk through some examples. I'm going to talk about sextortion and romance scams in particular, because they kind of encapsulate a lot of what goes on in scams, particularly romance scams. I'm going to focus more on individuals today rather than like organizational risk, because it's a little different. But the same methods really are used to target people in organizations too. So it's really quite relevant for both.
It's relevant for every single person who uses tech.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you know a lot about this topic as well. This isn't one of those ones where you're coming in fresh. So like feel free to jump in along the way with examples or tell me when I get things wrong.
Okay.
So obviously a bit of a content warning on this one. It's about cybercrime. I'm going to talk about things like romance scams and sextortion, like I said. So some of those crimes are obviously sexual in nature. I'm not going to get into huge detail, but it might be distressing for some listeners. So please take care of yourselves. And I'll put resources in the show notes for what to do if you've experienced any of these crimes. And in Ireland, I'll put the pages from the Garda Síochána on how to approach them and what they'll do if you do approach them. Please do get in touch with them if you have experienced any of these crimes. Okay, so first thing I want to do is talk about how prevalent these crimes are. And actually, that's something that's really hard to answer because there isn't really one definitive number, right? First of all, a lot of people just don't report these scams at all.
There's a sense of shame around
there can be
romance scams, or generally when someone is like, from a very simplistic perspective, duped you.
Yeah, exactly. So people sometimes feel like an idiot. They're embarrassed. If it's a romance scam, there can be sometimes things involved, like maybe they're married or they're, in a partnership with somebody and they've been involved online. But often people are just embarrassed. Or if it's a small scam. So if someone stole a small amount of money from you, you might not report it because you feel like it won't be taken seriously. But if it's a small scam, it means they're probably targeting a million other people. So it is always worth reporting. But having said that, there are some stats. So the Central Statistic Office, the CSO, has shown a 56% increase in recorded fraud and deception since 2020 up until 2024. So over 12,500 incidents in 2024 alone, which is a lot. And that is the ones that were reported.
I think that's really low.
Yeah. So there's many, many, many more than that, but we don't know how many. The surveys also show very, very high levels of attempted scams. So one of them reported that 64% of Irish adults experience phishing and over 80% have been targeted by scammers in the past year. Another one by Silicon Republic found that 64% of Irish adults had experienced phishing, so a little bit of a similar number there, which is significantly higher than the global average. Now, it might just be the way the questions were posed, possibly, because, everywhere around the world has pretty significantly high phishing. But it means that we are being targeted a lot in Ireland. We're a fairly wealthy country. We have very, very high tech use. So it's unsurprising that we would be targeted.
On our way over here, I had a phone call and it was from an Irish number, but I didn't recognize it. So my instant response was to copy, paste, put it into Google and figure out who it was. And if it's not a scam, it's like a customer service survey of some kind. I'm still going to ignore both of them.
Oh, yeah, completely.
But if I get stuff like that in on a continuous basis, I get emails. And even if you get someone who pretends to be from customer service of any kind, I still have this assumption that there's some kind of something behind it. But that's because obviously the work that we're in.
I know, yeah.
Whereas someone
Overly
else
cautious.
gets a phone call. And I'm sure we're going to talk about some of these different formats as well anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, if I get a number, if someone phones me from an unknown number, I just do not answer it.
Or a blocked phone number.
Don't answer it.
Yeah, see, I did this the other day. And I rang you And I rang a friend of mine, and I had deliberately put my phone on to restrict my number because I was making work phone calls from a personal device. And so I was like, oh, level of privacy, do that. And then I forgot to change it back. And the next day I rang you and you didn't pick up. And then, which is really unusual. I was like, oh. And then I rang one of my friends and she didn't pick up, and she was like, oh, it was just from a block. It was from a private or a restricted number, a block number. And she was like, I was never going to pick that up. No. And I was like, oh, okay. And at least this level of awareness is there. So we've changed our behaviour.
Yeah. And you didn't leave a voicemail, so I didn't know it was you, so I wasn't even going to call back or anything, even if I had the number.
Voicemails, very rare.
No. Nobody does. All these block numbers or other numbers call me and they don't leave voicemail messages. Like, they're not getting anything from me then. Figures from the Gardaí show 378 million reported stolen through online fraud in 5 years to the end of 2024. That is an extremely low number, I think. I would imagine that it is much, much larger. So, like I said, a lot of victims of online scams just don't report their loss for various reasons.
But there was also the piece we had in the Oireachtas, so in our government here, around cybersecurity and having cybersecurity experts come in and lead our national cybersecurity strategy. And one of the consultants said that we, as a nation, even though we're this tech hub in Europe, that we were not putting enough of a budget into cybersecurity, and that I think something like the salary for someone who was going to lead our cybercrime division was going to be something like 70 or 80,000 euro, and which was not even close.
People who are kind of low level in the industry can get that. That's insane.
But they were saying that we were just trying to pitch at a completely wrong level, and I think that was adjusted. But I think that was a consultant from the UK who was advising on our strategy, and I think that showed part of the problem is that we weren't looking at the severity of that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is just growing all the time. It's getting easier and easier to scam people because of AI and so on. So I'm going to talk about some different kinds of scams so that people are aware of them. But you can kind of talk about the kinds of scams that are popular at any given time or prevalent at any given time. But they just change and develop so much that knowing about particular scams isn't as useful as knowing about red flags of scams in general. So obviously the kind of broad things are fraud, identity theft, malware and ransomware. So malware is where your computer will get corrupted. Ransomware is where they can block you accessing all of your files, all of your devices until you pay a ransom, and they'll give you a code to free it up. Hopefully they don't always. You're trusting cyber criminals to do what they say they will after you have handed over loads of money to them. So it's not a great idea to pay that. Some companies do. I'll talk about an example in a minute, but generally recommended not to. So phishing emails are probably the most common thing, and also phishing text messages, smishing it's called sometimes. But the phishing emails or websites are designed to imitate legitimate entities. So it might look like an email from your bank or from Revenue or PayPal or something like that, where they're trying to get you to divulge details, security details.
I think the QR code one, and we've chatted about this before, like the QR code one is where you put a sticker of a QR code over in a pre-existing QR code, and it's the quality of how they've impersonated the QR code in terms of like how professional it looks on top of it.
And the app that it brings you to, or the website that it brings you to so that you pay.
Is very similar, or it's cloned. And there was a series of these in Dublin in relation to parking, and parking in Dublin is expensive. So like depending on where you park, it could be like €5 an hour or more.
Yeah.
So they had a series of these, and our local county councils, both in Dublin and different areas around the city, they started to send out like awareness campaigns around QR codes, and there was a series of text messages around it, and at least that spread quickly.
Yeah.
But how many people were impacted by it, we don't know.
And like once you give up your details, then they'll just take a whole bunch of money out of your account. Yeah. We're very lucky that the banks will often refund money that has been scammed up to a certain extent. Like if it's a large amount, they will try to make sure that you took reasonable measures and that you weren't unsafe. But for the most part, they're actually pretty good.
Yeah, they are.
So within phishing, you've got a few different categories as well. So spear phishing is where the email or the website is personalized to an individual. So this might be something like a fake tax debt with your name on it, or it might be around identity theft. So it's specific to you. Whale phishing is where it's personalized to a very high profile person or a very high net worth person or someone who has access to a lot of money. And I have an example of that from the real world in a moment. Phone scams, so SMS smishing and text phishing, is things like the DHL, FedEx Customs kind of messages that you get saying that you've got to pay some money to get your package released, or motorway toll scams, which have brought in a lot of money for a lot of people. Also things from your bank again, and they sometimes do number spoofing where they clone the number so it actually might appear in the text messages that have been from your bank previously, so it looks like it's a trusted source. So that's really a big problem. That can also happen with phishing, which is voice calls, where they call and pretend to be from your bank. Sometimes they might stay on the line and you hang up and you appear to call back and they're still there, and then they pretend to be your bank. So you have to be really careful with stuff like that. Other kinds of scams, CEO fraud, so targeting high net worth individuals, social media scams, things like advertising products on social media, trials, free trials, or where they take your credit card details and then take a lot of money.
Like some social media scams are not just about initial financial details. So when we talk about cybersecurity, people assume bank scam first, or someone's after bank details of some kind. Like I know I've had family members who have had messages from people in their network. So once someone has breached someone in your network, you are fallible. They send a message to say that person, and they say, "Oh, you're going to get a text message, and it'll let me back into my account."
Yes,
it's actually letting them into your account.
Yeah,
that's a really common one. That is a cybersecurity breach, and it happens all of the time on Meta.
Yeah,
especially if someone doesn't have 2FA or two-factor authentication set up, or something more complex than that. The amount of times I've seen that happen. And it's very hard once someone has access to that, they can then set up 2FA once they've breached you and then kick you out of your own account, which is obviously incredibly distressing for that person.
It absolutely is. I got kicked out of my Twitter account at one point. I have 2FA on everything now, but I didn't at that point. And it's really distressing because you don't know what they're going to post in your name. Or who you're going to contact, who they're going to contact in your DMs and things like that. So it's quite worrisome.
I remember DMing your Twitter account when you were breached to see what they respond.
And then there were all those scams that came in response to a tweet saying that I had been hacked, and all these bots answered to say, "Oh, we can help you recover your account." And it's that's another scam on top of it. Yeah. Invoice redirects are ones that happen a lot to companies, although they mostly are improving their systems to make sure this doesn't happen anymore. But it's basically if you're a company and you have a supplier and you need to pay them for, let's say printing, and you need to pay them 15 grand for printing, someone will call you and say, "Hey, we've changed our bank and these are the new bank details," and you update the details and you send the money, and that is not your supplier's bank details, that is the scammer's bank details. A lot of money gets redirected that way. SOS scams are where you get emergency messages from somebody in your family saying that their phone's been stolen or lost and they really need some money sent immediately. They're very, very common as well. Advanced fee frauds, where they say if you can deposit this check, we will give you money for it. So they send you a check for extra amounts. So if you're ever selling something online and someone sends you a check for £1,000 more than the thing you were selling, and then they want you to give that money back, probably the check is a false check. So that happened to me before when I was selling something online, and the check was very false. It was so obvious. It was really funny. Online shopping, like I said, free trials, things like ticket scams, non-existent products, romance scams, which I'm going to talk about, work from home scams, so get quick rich kind of scams. You can make $2,000 a week by just doing 3 hours work and stuff like that. There's a lot of ones I've seen recently about rental scams. So students are we have a huge rental accommodation problem and housing problem in Ireland. And students looking for places to rent will look online, they'll view somewhere online, and then they'll send a deposit to get it because you literally can't even wait to show up because it'll be gone.
Even though that practice is illegal. Taking a deposit to view a property is illegal, to be on a waiting list.
Yeah.
But which didn't actually prevent it from happening.
No, it totally didn't.
Still does actually happen.
Totally does. But anyway, scammers get in there as well and just take people's money. I've heard stories about house deposit scams where, kind of like the invoice redirect, somebody will call you and give you the bank details to put your house deposit in, or they'll email the details to you. You deposit the money and it went to a scammer and not to the estate agent or to the person that it was supposed to go to. So you could lose, a lot of money that way. Investment scams, and that includes things like cryptocurrency scams. But some of these are really sophisticated. They set up these online portals. You might even talk to somebody. I have an example of it in a minute. And you might look like you're making money for a while. You might even be able to withdraw money, and then all your money will disappear, and you'll realize that it's gone. There's a lot of deepfake scams now with voice cloning, video cloning, and so on. I'll talk about a couple of examples of that in a minute. So it's getting more complex. It also means that it's easier for scammers to personalize emails because they can pull so much information and do it kind of automatically using AI. So it's an increasing problem. It's a huge, huge, huge problem.
The AI and deepfake space is something that people won't necessarily be aware of, even whether it exists, and if they do, how sophisticated it might potentially be.
Yeah.
And even the live response to some of that information. So if you're asking someone a question that you assume that they might have the answer to, that a traditional scammer would have a lot of that information already to hand, but they wouldn't be able to replicate your voice, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very easy to trust that.
It is. And we have traditionally been able to trust what we hear and see, but we really have to doubt that now. So some other examples. Have you ever heard of money mules?
I haven't actually.
So this is where particularly young people are targeted to allow the scammer to use their bank account to hold some money for a period of time.
Right.
And they're often told that they'll be paid for that. So it's a quick way to make some money. So there was an example fairly recently of a student who let scammers use his bank account. They shifted more than €16,000 through the account that came from smishing crimes, so SMS scams. And he was promised €400 to allow them to use the account. He never actually got paid for it. And he was prosecuted for money laundering and giving a false statement to Gardaí. So when they tracked him down, they initially thought that he was innocent and didn't realise what was going on. But then they realised he actually had let them use the account. So even if you're not involved in the crimes, you are still helping them launder the proceeds of the crime. So you are still liable for it.
Especially if there's an awareness of it. No one gives money to people for free.
Exactly.
So always be very skeptical.
Yeah. So he was approached by someone on Snapchat to do it. And he is now offering to speak at local schools about the dangers of it, because obviously the consequences for him were really big. It means that it's difficult for him in future. Even if you get a fine or a community service, not being able to get a mortgage in future, not being able to open bank accounts in future, those kind of things. One of the pieces of money that was transferred into that guy's account came from a Cork woman who had fallen for a motorway toll scam. So eFlow is our motorway toll on the M50. And she had inadvertently responded to one of the scams and then discovered that over €9,000 was transferred out of her account into this guy's account. So you can see how multiple scams kind of...
And the eFlow scams are the really common ones that we do see text messages from all the time. I'm more surprised that €9,350 was allowed to be transferred out of her account.
I'd say she
without
put in,
her bank doing anything.
Yeah. I'd say she put in bank details or something. But yeah, normally the bank would let you know, that seems like an unusual transaction or something.
It seems like.
Certainly would be for me.
Who has any transaction like that?
They'd be lucky to get 50p out of my account.
Yeah.
So investment scams are often called pig butchering scams. Have you ever heard the term before?
No, it sounds like a lovely name.
Doesn't it? It's essentially the idea that the victims are pigs being prepared for slaughter. So you're trying to fatten them up, so you get them to invest more and more money in the fraudulent scheme until they're fat enough to slaughter.
Oh.
Lovely, huh?
Yeah.
So you get them to give you as much money as you can, and then you steal it. So an example of this, a guy who spoke to a piece on these kind of scams for Primetime, one of the big shows that we have that does investigations in Ireland. They called him Thomas in it. He was a businessman, and he lost €17,000 in a cryptocurrency investment scam. And what's really interesting, I think, about this case is he was deceived twice by two different scammers. So the first was the cryptocurrency scam. So he saw an offer about it on social media. He opened a cryptocurrency account on an online website, which is like obviously quite sophisticated. He started out depositing small amounts. So he started with like €50, added a little bit more money slowly. The account was showing him his profit rising. So he put in a bit more. He put in an extra €500. And then he was getting calls from the person operating the platform. So he was actually talking to somebody who urged him to put in more money so he could maximize his profit. So he put in €2,000 and then he put in €3,000. And he had video calls with this guy who showed him a passport for identification, everything, which of course later turned out to be a false passport. But it felt like it was verifiable and real and legit.
And lots of people invested, like they put pension pots into like Bitcoin and other forms of crypto.
Yeah.
I would be like, I've never invested in crypto because a lot of the scams around it, like on social media where someone posts that they've gotten all this money from this particular person, they tag them in it. Like they're the ones I've seen on social media from it. Yeah. I just don't have the courage to even go there.
Yeah, no, I'm keeping well away from that. I think if I don't understand something well enough to know how it can go wrong, I shouldn't be investing in it.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
So yeah, he withdrew some money from his account at one point. So he took out €600. That all seemed fine. So that makes it feel very legitimate. So that often happens. But then he was being reeled back in. So after he withdrew that money, he invested a larger sum. And then eventually when he tried to actually cash out and get back €12,000, it all went quiet. He couldn't reach the person he had been talking to and his money was gone. When the person did make contact again, he tried to persuade him to invest more money in it. But at that point, he realized that he had been scammed. But rather than go to the Gardaí, to the police, he went online to try and find a way to get control of his investment again. And that was when he was scammed a second time. So a seemingly legitimate person in the US said that he had found the money and could return it to him. And again, he was asked to pay a fee up front to free up the funds and was scammed again. You have to be really, really careful if you've been scammed for people like this who claim to be able to help you. But also when you're being scammed, that name, your email address, etc., will often go on a list so that other scammers know you've fallen for something before and that you might be more vulnerable to fall for something again. Gosh. People are often scammed more than once. It's really, really unfortunate. The level of paranoia I have is through the roof now, by the way. Yeah, it kind of even though I know this space, it's hearing about cases or stuff that's similar. I'm like, oh God. I know. So he did eventually go to the Gardaí and, you know, he'd kept stuff like the passport details and stuff, but he knows that now that that was a false document. And he was telling his story because he wanted people to be aware of the risks and stuff like this. Yeah. And, you know, he said people are working hard to get your money. They know what they're doing. They know how to use people's minds and they're very good at it. And that is 100% the case. So one of the biggest cyber attacks so far in the world was Colonial Pipeline. So they're an oil supplier or fuel supplier, and they were crippled by a ransomware attack in 2021. They lost 3.4 billion estimated, and like it resulted in like huge shutdowns, oil supplies disrupted, all sorts of stuff. Petrol prices went up, so it got passed on to the public. And it appears that the attackers were able to plant the malicious software because they gained access to an employee's password. So something so simple as getting access to someone's password means you can get into a system and work your way through it. Password is password. Yeah, exactly. So if you are in a work environment and you fall for one of those things that makes you put in your username and password, immediately let your IT system know, because then they can do a cleanup. But if they don't know what's in their system, it may not detect it. In terms of AI scams, there's a really big case that happened fairly recently. A UK engineering company, Arup, they fell victim to a £20 million deepfake scam. It's actually one of their employees in Hong Kong was duped into sending the cash to criminals. He had an AI-generated video call, right, with multiple people on it, including senior people in the organization that looked like real people, but they were all deepfakes. And because he was convinced that they were all real people, he transferred all of that money to local bank accounts via 15 different transactions. And that has to be a pretty sophisticated deepfake to do multiple pieces with video AI and convince the person. That's an overwhelming space for that
person who transferred the money.
So that would be a really good example of whale fishing. Even though that person wasn't high net worth, they had access to
high
the
net
money.
worth, yeah.
So it was really, really personalized specifically to target them. Have you heard about any of the AI kidnapping scams?
I've heard of the text message aspects of them, or like where they can't actually reach the parent.
Okay.
But I haven't had the voice ones.
Yeah. So the voice ones are scary, right? They sound traumatizing. It's basically, right, so there's a story in The Guardian of one of these in America, and this is generally kind of how they go. So you get a deepfake voice of your child calling you. This one, in this particular case, it said, "Mom, I've messed up." And then she heard a man instructing her kid to lie down and put her head back. And it was her 15-year-old daughter, Brianna. And at the time, her daughter was away with her husband at a skiing competition. So she thought she'd been really badly hurt. She thought she'd been kidnapped by somebody. And she was with the younger sister and around other people at a dance class. So she heard her daughter crying and shouting, "Help me, help me." And of course, she just lost it, right? Her heart stopped. She went to jelly.
Fight or flight response.
Yeah. And so the guy on the phone is yelling at her. He's saying that he's going to pump her daughter full of drugs, drop her in Mexico. She'd never see her again. So she sprinted into where other people were and tried to get help from other people. So she was shouting at other people saying, "Please call 911." A couple of the other people called 911. So the guy's still yelling threats down the phone with her and is saying that she needs to pay £1 million if she wants to see her daughter again. And she didn't have that kind of money. So she was agreeing to give him $50,000, and he was trying to tell her how she would do it, with a bag over her head so she wouldn't see him. He'd pull up in a white van, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But one of the mothers who'd been calling 911 came over to her and said, "It's AI, it's an AI scam." So the police had heard of these scams and had informed her, and she was trying to get through to her, but she was so panicky that she could hardly even hear the words and she couldn't even accept it. So she rang her husband, and her husband went and found her daughter. And until she spoke to her daughter in person, she just couldn't accept that it was actually not real, because
Which
she was so
I can
certain.
understand. Like, you're completely overwhelmed, and
Totally.
then even then, when you speak to them, because they've been impersonated to that high level, until you physically see them, I wouldn't trust it.
Exactly, yeah. And like she said, it was just, she broke down. She was so traumatized. She couldn't get over how real her voice sounded. And she was absolutely sure it had been her daughter's cries. So very, very traumatizing, even if you don't fall for the scam. But you can understand in that panic how you would stop thinking rationally and you would do anything you could to get your child.
Yeah.
What was, I think, interesting in this case as well, because she hadn't handed over any money, she hadn't been defrauded. So the police only considered it a prank call, which is awful.
Ooh.
Yeah.
See, this is what I like about our legislation around the sharing of non-consensual images.
Yeah.
Like, a threat is a crime.
Yeah.
Like, I love how the standpoint of that.
Yeah.
That's something that's needed here. So, like,
Really
it's a significant deterrent.
Yeah. A little bit like how catfishing can be very, very traumatizing, but isn't quite a crime here yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also something that needs to change.
Yeah. So, how are scammers doing this? They're using something called social engineering, which is basically exploiting people. And it's used a lot by criminals in loads of different crimes against people, both on and offline. And it's manipulating people into doing something that they shouldn't. So, for example, revealing information that you shouldn't, like your username and passwords, performing unsanctioned or prohibited tasks in work, so giving somebody access to something. They might use deceit, they might pretend to be somebody else, or they'll exploit flaws in our psychology to be convincing. And they are very, very good at it.
Yeah.
It can happen by email, on websites, over the phone, in person, and it is so effective.
You can search for social engineering on YouTube and see some of the different tactics that some people use, like ringing an electricity supplier and having a baby cry in the background, or something that is going to make the other person feel like they need to
help
kind of
you.
help you, because you're in that position and we can't help ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. Like, they use our desire to be good people sometimes against us. I think a really good example of that offline is something called tailgating. Have you ever heard of tailgating?
Yeah. So this is, you were chatting to me about this before. So this is where you let someone through a door.
Yeah, that you're not supposed to. So if you work in a secure environment in a bank, for example, and you know that only people with swipe card access are supposed to go into a particular area because of cybersecurity, you're not supposed to let people through. But if somebody comes right behind you at a door, It's extremely rude normally, and we're very socially conditioned to think it's rude to shut a door in somebody's face.
Not even shut the door in someone's face. I would
not
probably
hold
stop
it.
and hold the door open for them.
Yeah, I know.
Or if they had like a load of stuff in their hands.
You'd maybe even help them bring it in.
Yeah. Or like there's a lot of examples. Like what's similar to that is like someone pretends they're coming for a job interview and they want you to print off. They've forgotten something they were supposed to print. Here's a USB key. Could you do this for me?
Exactly.
And there's stuff like that where you gain system access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are like, most people are quite polite or quite nice, quite helpful, and that can be used against us.
If someone asks you for help that you've never met before in your workplace, tell them no.
Yeah.
And be mean.
Exactly. And like once they get into an office through tailgating, then people assume that they should be in there. So there's lots of examples where they walk around and they're chatting to people and then they see people's passwords on Post-it notes stuck to the front of their computer screen and all those kind of things, which is why we don't do stuff like that.
But a lot of tech firms here will have guest access or guest visitor access.
Yes.
And with that, they'll say they color code your purpose for being in the building.
Yeah.
And like the floors that you should or shouldn't necessarily have access to. So I think that is kind of helpful in that scenario, but definitely people are still going to fall prey to a tailgate.
They are. Most people believe that they would never fall for an online scam. So we do have a bit of an optimism bias. We feel like we're more likely good things will happen to us, less likely bad things will happen to us. Other people are more likely to have bad things happen to them. So we would never be the one who would fall for a scam.
It's like young people thinking they're never going to have any form of injury in life is going to be perfect, and old people thinking that everything's going to be terrible, so they protect themselves better.
That's because it is.
This is such a generalization, but typically that's actually how it works in research.
It's really interesting. You feel invincible when you're young.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, like given the right or rather like the wrong circumstances, most of us could fall for one. I have fallen for a scam before. It was when I was extremely stressed, probably the most stressed I've ever been in my life, right at the end of my PhD, trying to get it finished. I was in my university email, which I didn't use all that often. All of my cognition, my entire brain power was on my PhD and also finishing my marking. Which was not great. But I was in the email account and there was one from one of those kind of help desk things where it's like, you haven't been in here for long enough, you need to update your password details. So I clicked on it, I updated it. It was just a task that I could get done quite easily. And as soon as I hit enter, after putting my details in, I knew what I'd done. Like literally as soon as I did.
You have limited time and resources. It's a bit of cognitive overload. Similarity, you're already in your email. There's cognitive bias because this looks similar to something I would receive generally, and you don't have fair enough falling for that.
Yeah. It's very understandable, I think.
Yeah.
And as soon as I realized what had happened, I contacted IT and they were super nice. They responded the right way. They were really nice. They thanked me for doing it right away. They were like, we can fix that. If you hadn't told us, then someone can get into the system for longer and then they could do more damage. But we really need to know right away when this happens. You did exactly the right thing. They changed my password. It was grand. That was it. It was done in 2 minutes.
But I report emails to IT all the time.
There's so
all
many
of the time.
of them.
And even if I'm like, could be genuine, maybe it is. Like I report them for like conferences, journals, random emails.
Yeah, we get so much nonsense.
But I had one, I'll actually have to pull it out and show it to you. I had one that was like, I had reported it for spam and I got another email from the same person. And they were like, hey, just following up on my last email. Like, and this stuff that we normally do. And I was like, stop it. I reported them again. And then I put them into a spam folder. So I don't necessarily always like block the sender. I filter them.
Okay.
Because I use them as teaching material.
Yeah. They are good for that. Yeah. I have one that I use, which was an invitation from a predatory journal, fake journal, to publish. And they found my work just outstanding and moving and all this kind of stuff. I was like, that is not how journals approach us. They usually just say, no, we don't want to publish your research.
Yeah.
So it's a little different from normal. So yeah, anyone can fall for a scam, right? And scammers are really good at using our own psychology against us and manipulating us. So I'm going to talk about how they use human motivations, emotions, cognitive biases, and persuasion, and aspects of online communication to get us to fall for these scams. But first, before I get into those things, I just want to talk about the way that we think. So there's a dual process theory of kind of the way that we think and cognition, where we have two different types of thinking. So we all generally have a preference for one of these types of thinking. So we sit somewhere kind of on the spectrum between these two. But we all engage in both of these types of thinking as well. So there's system one thinking, which is more automatic, intuitive, emotive. It's quick. You're not necessarily analyzing everything before you make a decision.
Driving behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not yet, because I'm fairly new to driving, so I still have to think about every single thing I do.
Yeah, well, it will be.
But once you get used to driving,
one.
it's automatic, yeah. System two thinking, analytical, deliberative. You take your time, you're logical, and you think through what you're doing. So if you're buying a house, you're going to use system two thinking, right? Because it's a big decision that you need to make. But if you're buying popcorn, you might use system one thinking because it's a quick decision. Depends on the person you are. Depends on the person you are. Liam probably overthinks the popcorn.
I'm the person who's standing there for way too long and annoying everyone else in the background. Yeah.
But what a lot of the scams do is try to push us into system one thinking, that automatic, intuitive thinking, or they catch us when we're in that way of thinking, when we're not really thinking deeply, and then they exploit that and use it against us so that we don't notice the deeper things that are going on.
Where system one is your example from earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So overconfidence about believing you won't fall for scams can actually lead to victimization because it means that you don't think deeply about the stuff because you're certain you're not going to fall for it. And that means you think you're not vulnerable and it reduces your attention to the scams. So I don't feel confident that I won't fall for them. I feel aware and scared that I will, which makes me look at all the emails really carefully.
I was going to say I am absolutely not confident enough that I don't feel like I'm going to fall prey to these. I'm like... that probably is what is the only thing protecting me is my level of like paranoia and anxiety around being scammed. And I think that's a healthy position to be in. It is.
It's unfortunate though that we have to live like that.
But I think a healthy skepticism is important here.
Healthy skepticism in general is good in life, particularly at the moment with all the mis and disinformation around and everything. So let's talk about some of the ways our psychology is used against us. So the first one is manipulating common human motivations and emotions. So things like our desire to have more money, right? Mm-hmm. It's often called greed. But, you know, if you're broke, it's not greed to want to have enough money to cover the bases and to provide for your housing and food and stuff.
Go buy some eggs and come back to me.
Yeah, exactly. So these sort of scams are money-back scams, refunds from revenue, things like that, investment scams, work from home, get-rich-quick scams, all those kind of things play on our desire to have more money. And we would all like to have a little bit more money. Mm-hmm. But there's ones for people who are broke, there's ones for people who have lots of money. And, you know, if you're broke, it affects your psychology. It affects how much you're able to think because you're in survival mode. So you're not necessarily able to think as deeply about these things. And you might be more likely to fall for the scams because...
Or if you have more money, you think that the risk is lower because sure, what have I got to lose?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm so good at making money, therefore I wouldn't fall for it. So you might feel like you're invulnerable.
I can't put myself in that person.
I definitely don't have myself in that. Fear is a really, really big one that's used a lot by scammers. So this can be really simple things like there's unauthorized activity in your bank and you need to get in touch with us and sort it out. It might be things like you'll miss out on this opportunity if you don't take it now. Or it might be something like the kidnapping scam, right? Obviously, that's going to be a much bigger level of fear. Ego, so that's stuff like the predatory journals telling me how amazing my research is and how much they want to publish it. Mm-hmm. You also see this a lot in romance scams and sextortion, so I'll talk about those in a minute. But that's, you know, very flattering. They're telling you you're so amazing, you're beautiful, all those kind of things. They use our cognitive biases against us. And do you want to explain what cognitive biases are?
Yeah, so it's where something already aligns to your train of thought, your pre-existing thinking. So you don't spend as much time about thinking about it. I think it aligns to basically save us time. Yeah. We don't have to think about it as much because we already know, sure, I've seen that before. Mm-hmm. It's probably okay. So that's the email you got telling you to reset your password. Yeah. That is a bias that's happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's loads of cognitive biases and they're basically a way to save our brain's time and energy. We use them all the time and they're usually like really handy because there's so much stuff going on in the world. We cannot focus on everything. We can't remember everything. We can't pay attention to everything. So we have to decide what we're going to pay attention to, what we're going to remember, what we're going to make meaning out of. Sometimes we have bits of information and we need to join them up and make meaning from them.
But if you're getting an email that looks similar, that's going to start that filtering process already.
Yeah,
so exposure to something that already looks legitimate, if it's using the same color scheme, so like the Microsoft updates one is one that people fell prey to a lot because there's not a huge amount of interaction that you have as long as it was similar, and then surprise, you need to pay for a license that you didn't pay for, and that we don't consider them as much.
No, we don't. So yeah, confirmation bias, interpreting new evidence as confirmation of our existing beliefs. So if your first impression of the phishing email is that it's real, you're going to just not really notice anything that deviates from that. The familiarity preference. So because they use stuff like your bank's logo and you're familiar with your bank and you trust them, you're going to trust it more. And then when you're communicating through computer-mediated communication, or CMC, so through technology, it's often text-based. And so we're missing a lot of the nonverbal cues that we have face-to-face. So, what I'm saying in words to you conveys a certain amount of information, but my tone of voice will convey an amount more, my body language, my facial expression, all those things. So we're missing a lot of meaning, and we're pretty good at making up for it. So we use lots of things like emojis and exclamation marks and all that stuff. We'll do a whole episode about it. But what can happen is that it can lead you to developing false impressions or overly positive impressions. And I'll talk about how that's really impactful, particularly in romance scams. All right, that's something that's used a lot. Yeah. And then persuasions. We talked about persuasion in the episode on persuasion, surprisingly, which was all about influencers, which was a slightly less problematic way of using persuasion principles. Yeah. So this is Cialdini's work on persuasion. So there's a number of different principles. And researchers have looked at how they appear in different scams, and particularly in phishing scams. And they found that there's loads of them in them, and there's different approaches depending on the type of scam. But there's several that appear a lot, right, that are really, really common. The most common one is authority. So we are trained to listen to authority and to diffuse responsibility to authority. So if someone in authority asks you to do something, you're much more likely to do it than if some randomer does. And we allow them to take responsibility for the decision to ask us to do the thing, so we don't feel like we have to take control over it as much. Authority is often activated with urgency and stress. I was going to say
urgency is one of the big ones,
Because essentially what all of these things are trying to do is override your rational thinking.
But that kind of feeds into scarcity principle. I don't have enough time or attention or resources, and I click on the e-flow link, and that's the end of it.
Exactly, yeah. So scarcity of cognitive resources for yourself, like me finishing my PhD, time, urgency, those kinds of things. Also things like limited time offers comes into scarcity as well, where you're going to miss out if you don't do it right away. All those kind of things. You sometimes see social proof being used. So this might be like online shopping scams where there's loads of false reviews, 5-star reviews. And then in the middle of them, you see like one 1-star review going, why is everybody so positive about this? I can't believe it. Like nothing ever showed up. These guys are a scam. So they give you the idea that other people think this is good, or they might invoke other people's name in your company. So you feel like, well, if other people are doing it, it must be okay because I trust them. And if we all are doing it, then it's fine. Liking and similarity and reciprocity are 3 principles that are used quite a bit as well. And liking, so you'll see this in the romance scams. So setting up the person that you're talking to in a scam as someone who's very likable, someone who's similar to you, because we tend to prefer people who are similar to us, if you remember that from the online dating episode. And reciprocity, giving either like compliments or like small gifts.
So the Snapchat case is reciprocity as well.
It absolutely is. You're going to get €400 if you let us use your bank account. Of course, you didn't actually get the €400, but like they thought they were going to. So when we think someone is like us, we tend to like them more. We expect them to behave like us as well. So we don't think they'll scam us. We trust them more. And this is used a lot in romance scams and in sextortion scams as well. So I'll talk about sextortion. This is basically a form of image-based sexual abuse. It can happen in a lot of different ways, but what it typically refers to is usually gangs posing as young women luring men, right? So this tends to target men. Using very beautiful, young, highly sexualized women to lure them in, and sometimes using young men to lure in gay men as well. It'll be through an online dating site maybe, or through social media. They'll start chatting to you and they'll very quickly ask you to engage in sexual acts during a video chat. They record the footage and then they threaten to release it unless you pay a ransom. The number of cases reported to the Gardaí in Ireland are very low for this, but it happens a lot. People are embarrassed. And they're ashamed that they fell for it and they don't report it. And they really, really should, because this is happening so much. I've had quite a lot of people contact me panicking, wondering what to do when this happened to them, because they know I talk about this sort of stuff on media.
I've had people contact me about this, not in relation, like about sextortion, but not in relation to their business, just
Oh, just
personal
personal. Oh, this
finances.
is very personal. Yeah, this is
yeah.
usually personal. It's not related to business. And what they'll often have done, like some of them are more sophisticated than others. They'll have already checked out your social media and they'll know all the names of people. They'll know where you
Your
work
network.
and they'll tell you that so that it feels like they really will do it. Generally, they don't share it. So, like, you absolutely should not give them money because they will keep asking you for more and more and more and more. They will not stop.
Yeah.
So there's no point in giving them any money. You absolutely should go to the police and tell them about it. In Ireland, anyway, they are taking this seriously. And as much information as you can give them, the better, because then hopefully they can stop other people doing it. It is difficult because they're not always in Ireland. This can also happen in relationships and in other situations where someone is threatening to share nude or sexual images to coerce somebody into complying with demands like paying a ransom or sharing more intimate images or engaging in unwanted acts. So it can be in intimate partner abuse or cyberbullying or outing sex workers or outing people with, who are LGBTQ plus, and so on. So this can happen quite a lot, but typically when we talk about sextortion, it's those gangs kind of drawing men in with very young, attractive women. So, if there's someone on social media or online dating who tries to do that really quickly, I would highly recommend just being very, very careful and not doing it unless you don't mind your video going, because sometimes they do release it. There was a study done in 2024 that reviewed the literature and looked at the prevalence of this. So it was self-report studies anonymously, so people were able to report and say that it had happened without having to go to the police and say it. For young people, they found different ranges from like 0.7% to 5%. 5% is quite high for young people to have something like this happen. It's very distressing. Whereas adults, it was 4% to 18.7%. This is something that happens quite a lot.
That's really high.
And this is the whole range of that kind of victimization. It's not just the gangs posing as young women. So it's within relationships, cyberbullying, all those different situations, but it is still quite high for this to happen. So young people and sexual minorities are more likely to experience victimization, and young people, men and sexual minorities are also more likely to actually report engaging in the offending as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem, and it's something to be really, really careful of. It can result in really significant harm. So people absolutely panic. They get very, very distressed at the idea of these images or videos being shared with their family, with their workplaces and so on. Reporting and help seeking are very, very low on this because they feel ashamed, because they're afraid, and because they think that the police and digital platforms won't respond well to it as well. So definitely do contact the police, definitely report it on the digital platforms if you can, because it may potentially help somebody else not get extorted in the future. There was one victim who actually spoke to Primetime about his experience of this. He ended up paying €15,000, hoping that they wouldn't publish the video online. So it was someone who had contacted them through Facebook, a friend request from what seemed like a genuine profile. And it turned out to be one of these gangs. And they knew his social media. They were ready for him. They sent him a list of his friends saying they'd share the video. They wanted money right away and upfront. And of course, that pressure, that urgency means that you're not thinking straight, you're panicking, you've got all that fear and that emotion, which means that you might not make great decisions. And they just kept looking for more and more money and they never stopped. So over about 6 months, they sent 3,000 emails and he gave them a lot of money. And it really just destroyed him. So he talked about not sleeping, waking up all the time, being afraid to look at his phone, even thinking about suicide because it was so, so distressing. So he kind of eventually thought, I'm just going to have to face this. And they still publish his material online, even though he paid them so much money. So paying money doesn't mean that they're not going to publish it. So absolutely just do not give people money if they do this. It's not worth it. But why someone would kind of willingly engage in this kind of behavior, with someone that they don't know, It's quite exciting. You know, you've got someone who's very attractive, designed to be very likable. They're telling you they're interested in you. So you've got that likability, the reciprocity. They're engaging in sexual talk. So it feels like something quite intimate. You've got the online disinhibition effect, where you're more likely to do something online that you wouldn't do offline. You feel like maybe you're anonymous, and that what happens online is different to the real world.
But that's also from both sides. So even the guy that we were just talking about, you don't necessarily think that you're going to be exposed in that way because of disinhibition. It's not just that the other person is protected either. So anonymity online does give us a sense of security, often for a positive perspective. But in those scenarios can actually work against us.
Exactly. So the police advise you not to hand over any money, close down your social media accounts and speak to them as soon as possible. They will treat it confidentially. So that's highly recommended. In terms of romance scams, they're much more complex, and they tend to play out over a much longer time period. The sextortion happens very, very quickly usually. So there's an example from Ireland of an Irish woman who was given so many expensive gifts like scarves and perfumes, and then after a long period of time was asked to invest in the business of the person who had been courting her. So it was a 13-month period. She gave him €48,000.
Oh.
And she initially delayed reporting the fraud to the police because she was married.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can understand why somebody would be reluctant to report it. Not only have you been cheating, at least emotionally cheating, but also you've given away money that's between both partners.
Could you spend 48 grand without your spouse knowing?
I couldn't spend 48 grand if I tried. You have to have it to spend it.
No, but this is what I mean. Like, that person has been targeted probably because of significant wealth as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'll get through the process of how the romance scams work, but often what they'll do is they start out with some questions like, hey, where have you been on holidays recently? And, you know, where do you live? What's your house like? I'd love to know what your house is like. What kind of car do you drive? Because then they can determine how much free cash you might have.
Oh.
Yep. So they're looking for cues as to whether or not you're wealthy. So if you're not wealthy, they may not target you. They may not bother.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what they do. They find out. Or do you own your own business? Or are you successful in your business? I like successful women. They're really attractive.
My answer is just no.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm broke. Again, we don't know the extent of romance scams because so many victims are too embarrassed and too ashamed to report the fraud. They use a lot of different ways to get people to send money. So to cover the cost of traveling to see the victim. So they're saying that they want to come and see you and they can't afford to, for emergency medical expenses for one of their family members, usually a child, a business opportunity that'll allow you to live together comfortably, anything like that. It's a good excuse to get money out of people. Romance scams are kind of a perfect example of how everything that can be used to manipulate people in scams comes together in like a perfect storm. Mm-hmm. So I often talk about them even in a workplace talk because it just illustrates how well this stuff works. The profiles are designed carefully to be very attractive, very likable. The male profiles and the female profiles are usually somewhere abroad so that they can't meet you in person. There's usually a backstory with some sort of sub story. So the male profiles, the men tend to be a little bit older. They're in some sort of like good position. They're secure. They earn lots of money. So they might be working in medicine abroad, on oil rigs. They might be in the army somewhere. And that's why they can't come and see you right away. The women tend to be younger. They're in more socioeconomically deprived areas. So that's why they can't come and travel because they can't afford to. And there'll be some sort of backstory. So a lot of the men are widowed or have lost a child or something like that. And the women will have some sort of disadvantaged story as well. So that immediately makes you feel sorry for them and want to help them. So it invokes that response in people. They are designed to be very similar to you once you get talking, right? So the profile will be generic enough and attractive that when they start talking to you, they ask you loads and loads of questions. They want to find out everything about you, but they don't share as much because whatever they share, they have to keep track of because it's not true, obviously. But they want to find out as much about you as possible. And that's really powerful. So not only do they find out how much money you have, like in general from different bits of information, but it makes you feel listened to.
I was about to say, if you're lonely,
exactly,
someone is showing you attention, that is going to feel nice and you're going to keep going.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't feel listened to. And so it's very powerful. And actually, a lot of the victims, when they're interviewed by researchers afterwards, they talk about that being the best thing. Like, this is the best relationship I ever had. I've never been listened to like that before. So it's very, very powerful in a lot of different ways. You have the idea of scarcity, which is one true love. Like there is nothing more scarce than the idea that we have one true soulmate that we find, and this person is designed to be that person. And they very quickly tell you that. You know, they will love bomb you right from the start. So they start using pet names.
Expression.
I know. So it's basically this overwhelming thing. They want to talk to you all the time. They're telling you how amazing you are. They're giving you loads of compliments. You're the most beautiful person they've ever met. They feel connected to you in their heart and soul. They want to be with you forever. They'll tell you they love you very quickly. They'll use pet names because they don't want to mix you up with somebody else in their dossier that they're also talking to. So they'll call you my love or my star or things like that. There's particular
those
ones.
Pet names aren't genuine.
They're not. And this is all part of the grooming process. So they might give you gifts to engage you in reciprocity. So if they've given you gifts and then they ask you for something, you'll feel like you need to give something back in return because you kind of owe them. Or just compliments will equally work. You know, being there as a partner for you can also work. That is giving you something as well. So this grooming process can take time. There was one case in the UK where it was up to 2 years before they ever asked for anything. So with computer-mediated communication, you might have that heightened positive impression that you're creating. So you're texting back and forth all the time. They'll avoid video chat because obviously they're not who they are. Although we are seeing more like AI, deep fake. Yeah, they might send you a video clip of them talking to you, but probably not at the stage yet where they're having full conversations. So not being able to FaceTime or video chat with somebody is still a good indication that it's a bit of a problem.
Time zone issues.
Yeah. So they'll say things like time zone issues, or my camera's broken on my phone, or we're not allowed to do video calls on base for security reasons and things like that. So if someone's making excuses for not being able to video chat, that's definitely a red flag. If someone says they're going to come and meet you and then something happens and they can't, and then something happens and they can't over and over again, that's also a big red flag. That's why I found it hilarious in the online dating episode when you were talking about the amount of times that you had to put Stephen off before you actually met. Because I was like, that's a giant red flag for someone scamming you.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So Stephen got the ultimate scam. He ended up marrying you.
Yeah, exactly. It worked out well.
Yeah. So this grooming process, like I said, takes a lot of time. You get a lot of cognitive bias going on here, confirmation bias. So people are really enjoying the relationship. It feels amazing. And so they'll sometimes miss red flags because of that initial very positive first impression that they have. And they'll sometimes even miss something as obvious as an accent that doesn't match the backstory. But usually it's smaller red flags than that.
Okay.
In some ways, these relationships are a little bit like domestic abuse relationships, where if you start to suspect that something's wrong, they'll start to threaten to withdraw their love and say, oh, you obviously don't really love me, baby. We shouldn't be together, threaten to remove the relationship altogether. Or they might actually threaten people, but it tends to be more manipulative than outright threats, but it can result in outright threats. So inevitably, there'll be some sort of crisis or tragedy. And that's where you're evoking emotion, panic, urgency, stress, maybe authority. So it might be the medical emergency where you've got doctors involved and you need to pay for something, or customs or police are involved and you need to pay for something. They might ask you for a small amount of money to start, foot in the door technique, and then build from there and ask for more. Or they might ask you for a really big amount of money. So they might ask you for 100 grand and you're like, well, Jesus, I don't have that. And then they're like, okay, well, if you just had a couple of thousand, that would be enough to get me through this bit, and then I'll figure something else out. So it might be like that. Or they might ask you to invest in their business, like the case in Ireland. Sometimes if someone has sent sexual images or video, it can lead to blackmail, but that's actually a little bit less likely than the other methods. There can be a second level to the scam. So there's been a few cases in the UK where the police went to somebody and let them know they were being scammed. And the person's obviously extremely upset. And they go back to talk to the scammer to be angry at them. And the scammer says something like, look, I never really wanted to do this. Where I live is very socioeconomically deprived, or I was coerced into doing this. And I started out scamming you, but I actually fell in love with you.
Oh, Jesus, come on now.
And then the person has gone and traveled to meet them and got scammed further. But if you feel like you're in a relationship with somebody for like months at a time or a year or longer.
My response to that is not, Jesus, come on, because you've fallen for that. That's just, it's the response to the person who's doing it.
I know. It's so awful, isn't it?
It's high level Machiavellianism and enjoyment of doing that to
Causing
someone.
pain, yeah.
It's very, I don't know how you can morally disengage from engaging in those scams.
There's been some research on that.
Okay.
So there's different gangs that do this around the world. You sometimes get individuals doing it as well, but a lot of the times this is like formalized process. And what people who engage in it sometimes feel like, so the research that was done in this particular instance was in Africa. I can't remember which country it was. They were experiencing the results of colonization, right? So the poverty, not being able to be successful, that strain theory of crime where some people are doing well in the world and some people aren't, and you're trying to kind of balance things out a bit.
Yeah.
And so they felt like these people, white people from Western developed countries who were wealthy, deserved to lose the money. They didn't, like they had so much that they wouldn't miss it, or that they were so stupid to fall for the scam that they deserved it.
They brought it on themselves.
And they brought it on themselves. So they were able to morally disengage because of their history and because of their circumstances to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of cases now that we're reading more and more about, and there was actually quite a good documentary on RTE about this, about people who are scammed into working in these factories, engaging in romance scams. So you get workers from China and all different places in Asia, the Philippines, etc., who go to work for supposedly a tech company through like recruitment agency, but end up working in these scam factories, and they're basically imprisoned in the scam factories and beaten and tortured, and they are not allowed out. So there's one scam happening to other people who are then forcing them to scam other people, and they absolutely do not want to be doing it. So it is a huge problem. Like there's been countries, India, various other places have repatriated people, but there's like potentially thousands of people trapped in these circumstances, and not that many of them have been repatriated. Really good documentary about it on RTE. So it was a guy in Northern Ireland, an entrepreneur who was scammed, and he went to try and figure out what had happened and who scammed him, and he ended up at one of those factories.
Okay. I'm going to have to watch that now. Homework.
Yeah. So romance scams incorporate so much of this stuff. One other thing that I didn't mention that they sometimes do, so often family members will notice that something's wrong and will get concerned and suspect that something is wrong and off about the relationship. And the scammer will try, and a bit like domestic violence or domestic abuse, again, will try and separate you from your family. Oh, they're just jealous. They don't understand our relationship, that kind of thing, to try and make you not trust your family. So if you have a family member who's experiencing something like this, the best thing to do is try and be positive, like cautiously positive. I'm so excited for you. I would love to meet them and chat to them. Because then
eyeball them.
Yeah, eyeball them, and you're probably not going to be able to meet and chat with them. And then you can say, it's really weird that they don't want to meet me. I thought they'd love to meet your family. I'm so excited to meet them. And there might be a way in there to kind of break the perception.
Yeah.
But if you say you're being scammed, they're going to resist that very, very strongly a lot of the time.
Yeah, they'll get their back quite quickly.
And the other thing people say is never give money to somebody you don't know or that you haven't met. But if your partner, if your husband asked you for money, you of course would give money to him for something. You'd help him out. I'm looking at your face. Now. Maybe you're like, it depends.
It's a very old expression. Lender, no borrower, be such a housewife.
But in a situation like this, they feel like they do know the person, right? This is their partner that they are planning a life with. They're planning on like living together and getting married. So it doesn't feel like giving money to a stranger.
Yeah.
So that social norm of helping your partner is there, not the social norm of don't give money to a stranger.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that when we say don't give money to people you don't know, they feel like they know them. Yeah. But I would say definitely don't give money to someone that you haven't met in person. And even then you can run into problems. I mean, we know the scammers offline as well, so it's not
that's straightforward.
Without its own problems, yeah. So I talked about who the cyber criminals are. You know, sometimes they are people who are very, very deliberately doing this, and sometimes they are not. So a UN report in 2023 said at least 120,000 people in Myanmar and another 100,000 in Cambodia were forced into operating cyber fraud schemes, which is a lot. So there's a huge, huge number of people who are trapped into these schemes, which is just appalling. My final thoughts on this are the people who fall for scams, and that is the language we tend to use, it's not quite accurate. Like, we do fall for them. We get tricked into believing these things, but people who do fall for it are a victim of a crime, right? So we shouldn't be engaging in victim blaming. They are someone who has been victimized by a criminal who's very good at what they do. We are all vulnerable. It's really a matter of time before we fall for something rather than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you think you've been the victim of any kind of online fraud or scam, you really should try and report it to your local police. And particularly in Ireland, the guards are taking this much more seriously now. Use the online reporting service on the website or the forum where you were scammed or where you were approached. And when you go to the local Gardaí, bring copies of every bit of communication that you have, your account details, any advertisements of online posting, anything that's relevant that you have at all, because everything can be useful for them. And they have said they will treat all reports in confidence. So if there is something where maybe you're in a relationship with somebody and you've been engaging in a relationship online, they will treat it in confidence.
But I think even if something has happened working abroad, or you're on a Erasmus, or you're studying abroad and something happens, I would still be contacting the guards because they're your national police service. They're people who you know and trust, who can still provide you with support. Even if it's outside their jurisdiction, they're not going to go, sorry, you're in a different country, I can't help you about that now.
They'll at least be able to point you in the right direction.
But even just, they're still going to provide you with advice of best practice, or how to keep yourself safe, what to do next or now. I think the falling for scams language is problematic because of the kind of areas you've raised. I think anyone can fall for a scam.
They absolutely can.
It's really easy, especially with some of the concepts that we've spoken about. So I think if someone approaches you and says that they've fallen for a scam, the reason they haven't come to you is judgment. And that's one of the things that you do see. That like, how could that have happened to you? And I can't believe that happened to you. I
can't believe you were so stupid. It's really not a helpful response.
No, it's, Jesus Christ, that's terrible.
Yeah.
How can I give you a hand, or what do we do next? Do you want me to provide you with support and come to the guards with you if you need a hand to do that?
Exactly.
Or, hey, let's lock down your accounts. Do you need me to message someone on social media? Be an empathic person and see how you can provide support.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not have said it better myself. So thank you so much for listening. I know that was not the most uplifting episode, but I'm really hoping that the information, I know, for me particularly, I'm hoping the information will help you avoid some of these things in future and make you a little bit more aware of the kinds of ways that you can be manipulated. You've been listening to In Bits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. You can find us every second Tuesday on all the platforms that have podcasts on them. And you can find us on social media on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok at
In Bits.
Yes, I think.
Yes.
I can't remember. Brain dead. We would love to hear from you. Please leave a review. Please let us know what you'd like us to talk about. Give us feedback if you can, because we'd just love to hear from you. This episode was produced and edited by Owen Hurley, who also wrote our fantastic music. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.